episode 34 of Last Turn. I'm Bart, and I'm joined by Evan today. As always, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Another great day to talk about children's card games.
Those are my favorite. What have you been playing on the ladder? Tell me what you've been playing in Hearthstone.
Well, we started with Warlock. It's shifted from Q Block for me. I had been playing Q Block probably about in the middle of last season, and the deck list kind of shifted. I started seeing people using Doomsayers and no Carnivorous Cubes, and I was like, that's silly. But then I just started losing to it all the time. And I'm not opposed to the if you can't beat them, join them strategy. And sure enough, in the Vicious Syndicate meta report, which is out, by the way, number 88, great place to get some stats on the metagame. The Control Warlock list that I had been seeing was there, so I took a look at it, and it looks pretty solid. One card it's using, which I'm not, is Rin. The reason I'm not using it is because I don't feel like crafting it, but Rin is definitely very good in the deck. And it's the only demons in it are Void Lords. And the whole strategy is to just get out Void Lords and eventually, if your opponent, just don't die, and eventually you'll play Blood Reaver Gul'dan and win, or Rin and win. And
right.
It's really effective. Doomsayers, along with all, there's so much mass removal. There's the Hellfires, Defiles, Twisting Nethers. Another card that you should really use that I'm not using because I didn't craft it is Godfrey. Yeah, that card's
great.
Absolutely excellent. One card it can be really good against is Void Lord, which there are very few good cards against, but it's actually possible to even wipe all of the little babies from it if you're clever. And the little 1/3s that it summons.
Right.
So between all of that, and Doomsayer just sort of also prevents them from ever getting tempo. You're kind of guaranteed to get all this value from your area of removal effects, area of effect removal spells, but Doomsayer also means they're never going to be able to just flood the board again and put you out of the game if you don't have another one. You can just play Twisting Nether and play Doomsayer.
Yeah, I saw a bunch of lists on VS. I saw that the sort of new Q block list, and also echoes of those on HS Replay that take sort of the 4 flex slots that in my list were occupied by 2 Stonehill Defenders and Spellbreaker and Umbra, and sort of instead run Doomsayers, Tal'Daram, and Umbra. Those are the lists that I'm familiar with.
Yeah, this is much more different because this takes out the Doom cards entirely.
Oh, right. This is not the Q block list you're talking about. You're talking control deck. Sorry.
It's quite.
But yeah, Doomsayer's good. Doomsayer's good.
And it's instead of using Rin, I'm just using 2 Gnome Feratu.
Oh, that's silly.
They're just as good. No, they're not just as good.
No, not even close.
Ultimately, Gnome Feratu is pretty nice to have it. It's nice to have a 2-drop against aggro.
Yes,
but the difference is night and day against the control deck. One thing I didn't appreciate about Rin and why she is good is because the spells that you play, like the seals, also give you demons.
Yeah, that's really big because it helps out. I played Rin in Q block off of my Stonehill Defenders, and
of course, the classic.
That's what you put them in for, right? The demons are great because the bodies are reasonable, the 2/2s, whatever, but after that the bodies get pretty good, and they come back from Gul'dan, and when you get a 3/3 and a 4/4 back, that's really nice.
Yep, and usually that's instead of 1/3.
Yep.
And it also just gives your opponent a bunch of stuff that they have to deal with. And they'll sort of spend their hand killing the demons, and then you spend their deck with Osric.
Right. Yeah, it's one of the biggest benefits of Rin is it forces them to play differently. So the games where I've discovered Rin and played it on curve against a Hadronox Druid, they go from playing this conservative, I'm going to beat you in 25 turns game to this, oh my god, I better draw my combo pieces before they Rin me game.
Right.
And it's not like they're threatening you, in that kind of control mirror, what are they going to do? Play a Tar Creeper and hit you for 1? So you could just slam as many of the seals as you want and really just take as much damage as you want, and it's not going to matter.
Yeah, the whole way that they play changes, and then that's when Doomsayer really gets them.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
Because being able to play like turn 8 or 9 one of the seals in a Doomsayer is just like ruinous.
Yeah, Bryn's a card that's really surprised me.
Hmm.
I think when we rated it, we both thought it was complete garbage.
Yeah, it seemed way too time consuming, and you would just lose to any deck in the time it took to do it. But we weren't appreciating the fact that you were getting a 4/4 and a 5/5 and a 6/6 throughout the process.
Yeah, and a top menu when you play it, and like the effect is like it's pretty threatening. So
Hmm.
it's a lot of sort of smaller factors came together. It was hard. It's a tough card to evaluate.
It sort of functions in a way similar to like the Quest and Quest Rogue. Like it
Mm,
puts a cap on how dirtily you can play,
it's true.
and
Yeah.
that unto itself is powerful.
Yeah, it's funny actually. Quest Rogue is a deck that sort of saw a resurgence. I'm wondering if that is going to last through the week because like the meta changes pretty significantly when the first VS report comes out, like
Hmm.
it always does. So I'm wondering if Quest Rogue's going to make it through the week. Maybe not.
Yeah, I'm not sure. The new list is, I love Quest Rogue, and I still haven't played it yet because the new list has all these legendaries that I don't have. There's a
Oh,
theme.
Zola and
There's
stuff.
a theme going on here.
Hearthstone.
Yeah, you mentioned it before. Why bother casting Rin? I'll just get it off Stonehill Defender. Or
Right.
why bother crafting Rin? That's my logic. That's why I still haven't crafted it. I got 2 shots at Rin in my deck already. I don't need to spend 1,600 dust on that.
Sure,
Um,
sure.
and I can't do that with um, the 2/2 legendary. I always forget her name. She puts 1 cost copies
Oh,
of your deck.
Zola. Oh no, Sonia. Sonia.
Yeah, Sonya. I do have a Zola, but I don't have Sonya, and I don't
Oh yeah.
have the Death Knight.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to open like all the components of that deck, and I just never crafted it. I never crafted any of them. I just had them all.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, I was very very fortunate. Yeah, it's pretty fun. I mean, losing the Gadgetzan Ferryman was really big for the deck. I think because I actually played a bunch of Quest Rogue right before Witchwood came out.
I played a
At
little.
like yeah, it was fun. I played it at rank floor. Didn't really make it past rank floor, but I had a lot of fun playing the deck.
It seems like the Vicious Scale Hide gives it a new dimension,
Yes, definitely.
as well as Wax Elemental is pretty helpful in the deck.
Yeah, it's I mean, I still think like the most important card in the deck is like your glacial shard still,
That sounds about right.
because you still the games where you recur glacial shard and like you just draw your combo pieces pretty quick and turbo out the quest are like the compared to the games you don't do that, they're totally different. Because like against an aggro deck you can get your quest out and then just die because like it takes you kind of 2 turns from the turn where you trigger your quest. It takes you like 2 turns to actually be attacking, unless you have a bunch of charge minions, then it takes you 1 turn. But when you have glacial shard, you're just like no pressure was put on your life total, or very little pressure was put on your life total, so
Hmm.
you can actually just take that time.
And sort of no matter how hard they try, it never gets them any further. Like that, if
Yeah,
they just summon a minion that's twice as big, then you just slow them down twice as effectively with
yeah,
Glacial Shard.
exactly.
So it's not, you can fight the spiteful decks with it. You can fight all the mountain giants coming out of Warlock. It's there's no other card in the deck, or in the past there was no other card in the deck that really you could use in any way to interact with your opponent's board. Now you could. Now there's Vicious Scale Hide, but that's 1 damage, and you can only if you're trying to trigger the quest with Vicious Scale Hide, it can only be into a minion with two or less attack. So it's really
Right.
limited compared to
Yeah.
Glacial Shard, which just literally freezes anything and solves any minion problem at least for a turn, which is, I mean, that's all you need, right?
Sure.
Once enough turns pass, you sort of turn this corner, and it's not even close anymore. So if you turn that corner with a high health total against an aggro deck, it's very difficult to lose.
Yeah, it's a solid card. It's a fun deck. I've also actually been playing Warlock, but in a different format. So after I got Legend with Q Block last season, I swapped to Wild. Um,
Mm.
and I was playing Giants Warlock. So
Well, I was playing 2 mountain giants in my warlock deck in standard Bard. What's the difference?
I'm playing 6 more Giants.
What?
Yeah, so I mean that's, I'm sure if you follow any Hearthstone related content, you're sort of aware of this deck. The gimmick is you play Naga Sea Witch, which changes the cost of all your cards to 5, and you play a bunch of giants. So some patch happened a while ago where like this card was stealthily changed such that the giant cost reduction was applied after Naga Sea Witch's cost reduction. So suddenly all of your giants, instead of costing like 12 or 20, cost 5, and then their cost is reduced from there. So
Yeah,
like,
so like the molten giant, its cost goes down as you take damage from
mhm,
20. Naga Sea Witch makes it go down based on damage you've taken from 5.
yes.
So if you've taken 5 damage, molten giant is free.
Yes, that's the idea.
So that
Um,
if you're 25, you can play a free 8/8. That's pretty
yeah, and
gross.
your warlock. This is just a warlock deck that has, that starts going off on turn 5. So every single game, your first couple turns are your hero power.
And then mountain giant, if you have at least 5 cards in your hand,
Yeah.
it's going to be free. So if you tap 3 times, you'll be below 24 or below 25 and definitely have at least 5 cards in your hand. So that's 2 of them definitely being 0 mana. And
Hmm.
then after you play a few of them, Sea Giant is going to be free.
Yep, that's the other one. And then the fourth giant is Clockwork Giant,
That
which is your opponent's hand size.
is also 12.
Yes.
Okay, so if your opponent has 5 or more cards, it costs 0.
Which is, I mean, that's pretty much every deck. So
Yeah.
like even the aggro decks in Wild, like they're either a little bit, so the ones that aren't like even or odd and sort of slamming their hero power really often, they're actually kind of sort of more mid rangey. Like the Egg Paladin um tends to hold back cards so it could have these big like swingy turns. But the even and odd decks, like even Shaman or Odd Paladin or whatever, they're just pressing their hero power so often that they also have a lot of cards in their hand.
Okay.
So Clockwork Giant works against all those. And then obviously if you're playing against a control deck, they have a billion cards in their hand. You probably just play your Clockwork Giant before you play your Naga Sea Witch in those matchups. If you're not playing a Mountain Giant first.
Hmm.
But yeah, so I played that deck a bunch, from the like high ranks, like rank 20 to uh, down to rank 5, where it
Nice.
stopped working. Then I switched to Odd Paladin, and that worked for a little bit. But I didn't quite get Legend. I got to like rank 2.
Oh, the giant stopped working?
Yeah, I started facing a lot of strong aggro decks. I mean,
Mm.
it's kind of like Cube Block. The decks actually play really, really similarly in that your first few turns are basically like identical. You're just hero powering and playing your librarian and like Doomsayer or whatever, and hoping you have to file. And then on turn 5, you're hoping to like do something and then live another turn so you can start to dominate your opponent. So you give your opponent a lot of time to work with, and if you don't draw the right interaction, you can't really beat them if they're going fast.
That does sound. I mean, it's wild. So those aggressive decks have some pretty
They're
nasty
strong.
stuff.
Yeah, it's so one thing that really like we can go into a whole episode about this at some point, but one really major difference is that the fast decks are fast and the games are like decided pretty quickly.
Hmm.
I'm definitely running into Reno decks because Reno Jackson's an insane card and there's a lot of support for it, especially as the card pool gets bigger. But there's not it's not all Reno decks. It's not all Reno and Azoth like it was maybe a year ago. It's just there's the blisteringly fast decks are blisteringly fast. There's a lot of really, really powerful aggressive strategies like Shaman and Paladin, and they decide the game very quickly. So either they're going to concede because you got your stuff out before they did theirs, or they're going to kill you.
It's. I mean, it sounds pretty healthy, right?
Yeah, I think it's hard for me to comment on the health without really seeing it's a pretty rigorous analysis. I don't know matchup win rates and stuff, but there's a variety of decks. Though that deck variety can result from a lot of places. Sort of, we just saw an early metagame with Witchwood coming out in Standard, right? So there was a lot of deck variety, but it wasn't because there were a lot of equally powerful decks. It's because there were a lot of untuned decks.
Hmm.
Wild is a format that inherently gets a lot less attention because of Blizzard's promotion strategies and their tournaments, but also just the number of players on the ladder and the statistical services that exist. VS does weekly reports on Standard. It does like expansion, once per expansion, a report on Wild, and HS Replay has data on Wild, but the HS Replay aggregate data it has some really, really fatal caveats,
Hmm.
important caveats to consider at least. So
It's
anyhow,
well, it's nice that there's this format that's always available. It's still unsolved. That's what I like about Wild. I always
yeah,
feel a lot more like I can brainstorm something and give it a shot and actually have realistic success versus standard because it doesn't get solved nearly as quickly. So an unusual deck has more right to be there.
it's true. You can basically, so that's a really big advantage in Wild. You play basically whatever class you want, in kind of whatever strategy you want. Uh, Also, big difference between Standard and Wild, and also sort of, I guess, the main topic for today is, well, Shaman is like a tier 1 deck in Wild right now, and it's like a tier 0 deck in Standard. It just does, or not tier 0, I guess tier infinity. It just doesn't, I guess tier 0 and tier S are the same thing, right? Uh, it just doesn't, Shaman just doesn't exist in Standard, and it has not existed in Standard for a while.
Yeah, that. This is something we started chatting about it before we began recording, but it's a pretty interesting subject of ultimately why we don't see Thrall in Standard. And one thing that helps illuminate it, which you mentioned, nice thing about Wild is you can play any class. That's sort of a jab at Standard because you kind of can't. Um, the Thrall is really strong in Wild. I mean, a big part of it has got to be Tunnel Trog and Totem Golem, though.
Of course, yeah, totally.
So, like,
Or more specifically, Totem Golem, because the even deck is so strong in Wild.
yeah. So, you know more about that. What else is that running? Obviously, Maelstrom Portal.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the biggest includes that Standard does not have are Maelstrom Portal and Totem Golem. So you sort of correctly identified those. But there's also Jade Lightning, a card that saw play in every single Shaman list when
What
it was legal in Standard.
isn't Jade Claws even better than Jade Lightning?
Jade Claws is even better than Jade Lightning, and probably part of the reason that Jade Lightning saw play. So it's also running Jade Claws, which is an incredible 2-mana weapon. Uh, and both Jade Claws and Jade Lightning interact with each other. You don't even need to have them in your hand at the same time, or you can cast them close to the same turn. They build on each other because they sort of make the incidental effects of those cards stronger, but the sort of superficial on its face effects of both Jade Claws and Jade Lightning are like, it's already at rate. 4 mana for 4 damage is fine, and 2 mana for a 2/2 weapon is fine. Overload 1 is lame, but you're getting minions, so it's okay.
Yeah, if you just always assume you get a 1/1, they're like, oh, I like this card in a deck where I always want to have a minion.
Yeah,
But then if you think about the games where you happen to play 3 of them, like dealing 4 and getting a 3/3 for 4 is filthy.
yeah. I mean, it gets pretty gross once you start to consider minions that are like 2 power, 2 toughness, or more.
It
Um,
gets degenerate, but I would say it is the 3 cards that cost 2: Jade Claws, Totem Golem, Maelstrom Portal. Those are
I
the
think
big
those
3.
those make yeah, those are a huge difference. I think that those are, and Crackle. Crackle is also another really important one.
What about
It's just
Snap and Pop?
Snap is a magic card.
There
Is
is.
Pop a magic card?
I don't think so, but we have Zap, and
That
which is
that counts.
also in Shaman. So Shaman has Zap and Crackle, which is pretty good.
Yeah.
We're getting
I
there,
don't.
and Blazing Invocation.
That's basically the Pop.
If you're Mage and you play Blazing Invocation, you can discover Toki.
This is how you make Shaman viable. You play Mage. So um yeah, so the deck just has access to a lot more tools that it doesn't have in Standard. Like a lot of these cards, actually all of them that we just mentioned are simply not in Standard anymore, and these are archetype defining for Shaman in Wild. So there's a lot of perspectives you could take on that, right? Like you could say that in the past they printed a bunch of really overpowered Shaman cards, and now they're gone. So Shaman is a lot weaker necessarily. Another alternative is that the cards they printed in the past for Shaman were maybe not overpowered. Maybe they were correctly powered for the current power level of Standard, but and now what they're releasing is undertuned.
Yeah, it is difficult to see, and when you just sort of think about cards like Totem Golem and how unfair they can be and how popular they were, you gotta assume there's some amount of, or my first instinct is that there's some amount of those cards were overpowered, but really, Were they? Because another thing that you and I kind of mentioned before we even started recording was overload is bad, or
Yeah.
how not that overload is bad, but um, how much that really impacts you, and how devastating being overloaded for mana actually is, and how strong a card really has to be for overload to be okay on it. And that kind of gets you thinking, well, maybe Jade Claws and Totem Golem are actually completely appropriate.
Yeah, so that's I think that's a really interesting place to go. And I think there are a lot of examples of cards that on their face are incredibly strong, but see like very small amounts of play because they have overload. One that we all see in our collections probably as soon as we open Shaman is Lightning Bolt.
It's I mean, there's a Magic card called Lightning Bolt, and it is in no means a lightweight. But
Yeah,
I never think about using Lightning Bolt when I make a Shaman deck.
yeah, it's just like 1 mana for 3 damage is a whole lot. But the overload one means it's 2 mana for 3 damage, but like you're not spending 2 mana necessarily. It kind of screws up a turn. So lightning bolt, it's not like you're paying one twice and you get to sort of control when you pay the second one or whatever. You're doing it over the course of 2 turns, which can take you off your curve, and that can screw up your deck, and that can screw up your plays, and like that means that lightning bolt is just more conditional than a card that costs 2 mana.
Yeah, it would be less conditional if you could choose between paying two right now or taking out a loan and paying one now and one later.
Yeah, because imagine you have 2 mana and you cast Lightning Bolt and pass your turn. You actually spent 3 mana on Lightning Bolt at least. And if the next turn, like you can't play your 3 drop, you have to play another 1 drop. You just paid 4 mana for it. And
That's
like,
hurting my heart.
yeah, and but you did so in a way that like you couldn't have pressed your hero power and also sort of cast both cards at the times that you did. It's just or roughly the same time. It's a challenging sort of situation.
And it's a challenging mechanic to get right. Lightning Bolt is a strong effect, and I think it has been played in the past, and sometimes it's worth it, but um, it goes to show that you can make a card pretty great, and Overload still just makes it something that you actually stay away from for the most part. I mean, even like Forked Lightning on its face looks like it could have been solid, but that's a lot of Overload. I
Yeah,
also
yes,
know
it
that
is.
there were times that Flame Wreath's Faceless, the famous 4 mana 7/7, just didn't get played because investing 6 mana, the 4 and then the 2 Overload, on a guy that could just get frozen or polymorphed wasn't worth it.
Yeah, totally. It's that card pretty much only saw a lot of play when Tunnel Trog was around because that was a way to take your overload and convert it to value.
Hmm.
Um, and but other than that, the famous overstated power creep sort of minion was just like a fringe play card. It saw, outside of archetypes where there was Tunnel Trog, it just didn't really ever see play.
Yeah, so ultimately, what should have been this example of Shaman getting broken cards is actually an example of Shaman getting a perfectly fair card.
Yes, but I think that like the fact that a 4 mana 7/7 overload 2, just basically vanilla 4 mana 7/7 with overload is a fair card, or even a slightly underpowered card, just tells you how much of a detriment overload really is.
This is true.
So another example is Feral Spirit. So this is a card that I think has seen a fair amount of play. Like this seems like it's pretty balanced.
Hmm.
On its face, it's a 3 mana Sarnite Chain Gang, and like that's really huge. Because if you got Sarnite Chain Gang a turn earlier, like okay, it costs 1 less mana, whatever. That's still 25% less mana, and also the 2/3 taunts on turn 3 are going to be way more impactful than on turn 4.
Definitely, and
Just
Saronite
by
on curve can like be pretty threatening against a control deck.
totally, yeah. If they didn't have if their 3 drop wasn't like a 3 mana minion, it was like a 2 mana, like a 1 mana minion hero power or something like that, then Sarnite Chain Gang is awesome. It's usually a wall. It usually like takes with it at least 1 minion worth of value. Imagine getting that a turn earlier, but you're overloading twice. And so Feral Spirit saw some play, but it didn't really see wide play until Tunnel Trog was around again to convert the overload to value.
Yeah, that definitely seems like ultimately not. Tunnel Trog doesn't when you put it like that, Tunnel Trog doesn't seem like a mistakenly overpowered card, but just something that helped work out and define one of the qualities of Shaman, which is that it overloads and gets value out of it. I mean, there are other cards that try to do that; they just fall flat on their faces.
Yeah, because they're kind of weak or conditional. Like Lava Shock, I think was a good example. It's like 2 mana, deal 2 damage, unlock your overloaded crystals. It's also weird because like I think you have to like do it on the subsequent turn or whatever.
Actually, you can do it on either turn, which is cool.
I see.
They might have patched that. You might have played it when it wasn't like that, but you could play like a lightning bolt this turn, and then pass, and then on your following turn play another lightning bolt, and then lava shock, and it'll fix both crystals. You'll get 1 mana right now,
Oh, cool.
and you'll also unlock the crystal for next turn.
I see. So I think I just misunderstood the effect then. But it's still, I mean, the card didn't really see play.
No, because like it was like unreliable to put a bunch of cards that overload you too much in your deck. Then you just don't draw your lava shock, and you can't do anything the entire game. Not enough of the overload cards have enough of a payoff. A lot of the best ones were just overloading you for one, like Totem Golem. So something like Lava Shock isn't giving you enough value anyway. Um, there were some control decks that kind of tried to work with the 3 mana spell that deals 4 to 5 damage, Elemental Destruction or something like that.
Yeah, that was a French play card.
And that has over 3 mana for 4 to 5 damage to all minions, overload 5. So Lava Shock was sweet with that. I thought that was cool design. It wasn't overpowered at all,
No.
not even a little bit.
Yeah.
It was almost not even good. But that is the kind of thing that it looked good and it still wasn't good enough. And then there's stuff like Unbound Elemental, which is a 3 mana 2/4. Compare that to Tunnel Trog, which is a 1 mana 1/3.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, I think a lot of the issue with one of the biggest issues with Overload is like if you're not using it to cheat out the card early, you're using it to sort of fill out your curve later. But a lot of the advantage of having Overload on a card at all is like so that you can get the card out early. But a lot of the cards that have Overload on them are sort of conditional. They're not necessarily cards you want to play early. Like you really don't want to deal 3 damage to something on turn 1 with one card. You're usually looking to like when you're killing their mana worm, you're usually not looking to spend a whole card on it.
yeah, or
So
like Crushing Hand. It's
yeah,
2
exactly.
mana
Like
for 8 damage to a minion, overload 3. Like, sure, I'm willing to. I guess I'm willing to spend 5 mana to kill a mountain giant. It's still not very. That's an assassinate. That's not a particularly efficient thing to do. But what if they have like a 5/5 or like
yeah, yeah.
a 4/4 that's annoying me, and I'm looking at my Crushing Hand like this is. I feel like I'm the guy under the fist.
Because I mean, you're also like you're not looking to deal 8 damage to something on turn 2. You
Yeah,
know?
the value of Overload is almost inherently related to tempo and being a tempo deck and playing cards like Tunnel Trog and Totem Golem. I don't think it has to be, but it certainly gravitates towards that.
Yeah, it's I think that's like the Tunnel Trog. Tunnel Trog was a really good way to sort of convert the Overload to value and take some of these more derpy cards and actually help you get early game presence. But I think Totem Golem is really like I think that's what you want to be doing with your Overload. You want to be like, okay, I cheated out something early that's going to affect the board. So like I'm trying to make a tempo game and I played Totem Golem. Like maybe it was a little bit too strong. That's possible. It was metagame defining for a really long time. Um, and it's hard to get that exactly right. There's not that many numbers you can change on that to make it you know playable.
Hmm.
But I think that that's still kind of the flavor of what you're looking to get with Overload. You're looking to get presence, but unfortunately, so many of the Overload cards in Shaman are just removal, just damage spells. Like they're things that when you play them, you're kind of playing them because you have to play them. It's not like, oh, my tempo play is to play this Crushing Hand. My tempo play is to deal 8 damage to one of their minions. Like, no, your tempo play is to play a minion, and you're dealing 8 damage to a minion with a spell because a full card because you have to. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to make your tempo play. And then you have Overload, which is just so tempo negative. It like screws up your curve, and maybe you can't make your tempo play, and you just have to like hero power and burn a bunch of mana, and like
Mm.
this. The Overload is just not on the right suite of cards right now, I think.
Yeah, or if it is, they're too expensive still. Like cards like that that are defensive like that should just cost even less or not overload you as much. It
Yeah,
should be less punishing. I think that like I like Earth Elemental. That's a 5 mana 7/8 taunt overload 3.
yeah, I like that.
That's I think another cool way to use overload, allow you to cheat out this minion that's going to affect the board, like you said. And then it's just sort of on the opposite end rather than getting it super early. So it's tough for them to do something about it. You can kind of use it with other neat stuff in Shaman, like the things that make it revive when it dies, or a Faceless Manipulator, or something like that. So I think that's another fun, good use of Overload, but once again, it's not a removal spell. It is kind of defensive. It's a 7/8 taunt, but really a 7/8 taunt is not, strictly a defense play. That will
Of
just
course,
win
yeah.
you the game by hitting your opponent a bunch of times. I like Volcano too. I think that you can get the right amount of damage out of it, and if the overload is keeping its cost down, that means you can Volcano and do something. Um, it's just that it's still kind of expensive for what it does when it comes down to it.
Yeah, it's true, but I mean, like, I think around turn 5, when you have access to Volcano, 15 damage to all minions can be a board wipe,
Yeah,
and like close to a Twisting Nether level of board wipe. And I think that's like, so I think Volcano is sort of appropriately costed, and it also sees play in more controlling Shaman decks when those happen to exist.
oh yeah, this is definitely like a hit as far as overload is concerned. It's just like awkwardly like if overload was to be defining the class, like this card doesn't make me want to play lava shock, it doesn't work with unbound elemental. you
Yeah.
know so
Or tunnel shot.
it just
Yeah, but I mean, this is like, unlike something like lightning bolt. This is a kind of effect you want to get early, because you're like, oh man, I'm really, imagine the games where you're playing Warlock and you are playing Twisting Nether in your deck, and you're thinking like, oh my god, it's turn 5, I really want to play a Twisting Nether, like I have to play this survival game until I can cast it. And Volcano just lets you do that, and you're happy to get the overload so that you just don't lose. Paying 2 mana crystals on your next turn is a small cost compared to that.
yeah, they just need to find better, or something that would be really helpful would be is if they could find better ways to reward you for overloading your crystals. And I think they've been trying, but still not really getting there. Like the
Yeah,
Spellstone, I think was a great place to reward you for overloading because it doesn't have to be on the board. You don't have to, like with Unbound Elemental, you're like, I want to buff this overload minion, so now I have to spend 3 mana here and then play my overload card and then play the overload cost. It's really expensive at the end of the day. If this is just getting buffed by overloading while it sits in your hand, I love that. It's just, it's not a good card.
I mean, part of the issue there is like, so another decent payoff is like the Snow Fury Giant. Is that what it's called?
Yeah,
The
I'm
giant.
looking at it right now. That's another. The way they implemented you getting rewarded for overloading is good. It's an 11 mana 8/8 elemental, which is cool. The other giants aren't elementals. And it costs 1 less for each mana crystal you've overloaded throughout the game.
Yes, right. So that's nice because it doesn't even need to be in your hand to pay you off for overloading. It's something you can just like, you can play that reactive game where you're just dealing with an awkward curve and casting removal spells, and then eventually get paid off with Snow Fury. Um, but that's not enough of a strategy. The decks that are playing reactive games are doing something much more powerful than playing 1/8/8.
Yeah,
They're doing that on turn 4.
yeah. There would need to be some sort of shutter walk, replay every overload spell you've cast, or something like that. Something much bigger to reward you, and something that can come out faster. Warlock can use its class identity of tapping all the time
Yeah.
to get a Mountain Giant out turn 4. You can't play Snow Fury Giant turn 4.
Yeah, right, exactly. Also, I think one of the biggest issues with Spellstone is like it costs 7, so chances are you're not playing your big Spellstone target and the Spellstone on the same turn, which I think is huge. I think that kills the card.
Definitely.
You know, imagine this thing costs 5 and you could play your Earth Elemental and your Spellstone on it.
That would be fun. I want to live there.
Yeah, that sounds like fair. That sounds like that's a 10 mana play, and you're getting a bunch of 7/8s like for 2 cards. That sounds, but after you've done a bunch of
After
stuff,
you've
it's not
overloaded
free,
6 crystals.
right? So that sounds to me like an acceptable payoff for that level of work and that level of investment. 10 mana on 2 cards.
But I
So,
mean,
but
if they made lesser Sapphire Spellstone that strong, along with Shaman having access to cryostasis, I mean, who knows what would have happened?
oh my god, you'd get all these frozen minions. You'd get, yeah, that's but I mean, I think that actually takes us into going beyond overload and maybe how it's way too detrimental because of its impact on your curve, and like the cost is really high and it's just on the wrong suite of cards. So going past the fact that overload is a huge problem for the class, once you take away all those overload cards, like the conditional, the overload cards that are either not good enough to see play or the ones that are sort of conditional removal spells or whatever, um, there's just there's nothing left in the class. There's no cards that are like, you can identify one-ofs that are here that are decent, like Primal Fin Totem or Manatide Totem, sure,
Hmm.
but there's nothing like thematic and really like incredibly powerful that's worth building your deck around. There's nothing even close to like Dark Pact level of power.
It does feel very all over the place, for sure.
Yeah, you have some freeze cards, you have some random Murloc synergies, you have like this stuff that's like that, Death Rattle resummon this minion, stuff that synergizes with having like massive unremovable dudes. You have some just like random 1 damage spells and like a hex that just got nerfed for some reason.
And then
Um,
build a totem deck, and while you're at it, build an elemental deck. And while you're
yeah,
at it,
like
put all the Murlocs into. And give them all
you
Wind
just
Fury.
you have this synergy for like the totem synergy, which just like there's no payoff there whatsoever. And like, yeah, then you have like a random even support card, and then you just have a bunch of legendaries that like don't do any like Windcheer Stormcaller is not a legendary, but here's a good example of like why the totem payoff. So the totem payoff is so bad. If you control all 4 basic, it's 5 mana 5/5 battle cry. If you control all 4 basic totems, summon Alakir the Windlord. Like if if Paladin gets 4 of its 2/2s out after it plays the Death Knight, you die. It kills you. The game is over. And like this is this is like a comparable level of difficulty, definitely easier because I think it's asking a lot less, and there's other ways to get totems out. But like what you get is a minion that is just like kind of understated for its cost and doesn't really see all that much play. It's just not good. They missed completely.
Yeah, I mean, it ultimately getting a 5/5 and Alec here is sweet, but the work is it's so much work.
Yeah, it's not worth building a deck around. That payoff is not nearly good enough. If
No.
you're much better off just playing a deck that can survive until it has 8 mana crystals that are not overloaded, which is probably hard, and playing Alakir.
Yeah, I mean, so the other decks that go along just do all these insane things like Q block. There's Hadronox Druid. Control Warrior just is never going to run out of deck and have absurd amounts of armor. None of this stuff really. There's no closer. There's no way to close the game with Shaman.
Yeah, it doesn't have good aggro tools right now, and it doesn't, at least in standard, and like yeah, it doesn't have good end game plays. Like the another challenging thing is designing end game plays for Shaman because when you're running overload cards, like in the early game, that means you miss spots on your curve, which is horrendous, and in the late game, that means you might miss an 8, 9, or 10 mana play, which is also potentially horrendous.
Hmm.
So like if you make an end game card for Shaman that costs 10 mana, that might, like, even if its effect is really really strong, putting that card in your deck and playing it is non-trivial because like if you cast Lightning Bolt on the previous turn, you have 9 mana crystals, you cast Lightning Bolt, go to 8 mana crystals and pass the turn, then you can't play that 10 mana card next turn because of how Overload is designed.
Yeah, I feel like they should. Or they probably are working on this, but finding more creative ways to let overload not be a huge issue. I think it would be cool if they made, you know, something that maybe costs 3, and then when you play it, you can choose to pay 2 more mana now or overload 2, something like that. We mentioned that,
Yeah,
that would help Overload in general. Maybe they can make cards every now and then that have optional Overload, essentially.
I mean, another option which is substantially more extreme is to make that like a base level mechanic, because just to make that how Overload
You
works and to
may
retune all the
Overload
Overload
too,
cards.
basically,
Yes.
is how they Overload Overload X. You may have X less mana next turn.
Yeah, that's basically it. It's just like you can the Overload is like added to the mana cost, but you can take a loan on it. So if something was 1 mana and had Overload 2, if you had 3 mana, it would cost 3. Um, or it goes into your next turn. Like, okay, yeah, that might screw up your sequencing or whatever, but I still think that's far better than what we have now. Probably so much so they would have to retune some of Shaman's cards, but it's not like a lot of these Overload cards see play anyway. So
hmm
I think that having to rework them is completely okay.
Yeah, that I would prefer if they could find a way to just reward you enough for overloading that they don't have to do that, and have more ways where you can overload and not damn yourself. Like another problem with overload is you don't know what you're going to draw next turn. So you might, you can make a play and be like, based on my current knowledge, losing this 1 mana next turn doesn't really make a difference. But then you could draw something that would be great, and you're locked out of that play. Whereas no other class ever really has that. So you're just every now and then, due to RNG, being denied great plays, which doesn't feel good and isn't effective. Um, Another thing, like there could be an overload card that does something good, and an additional thing they tack on is look at the top card of your deck, or something like that. That could be something that they start. They could make a 2 mana 3/4 overload one. When you play it, look at the top card of your deck. Maybe that's a bit too good. 2 mana 3/3 overload one.
Yeah, I mean 2 mana 3/3 Overload 1. That sounds like a pretty balanced totem golem to me.
Yeah, and then maybe make an elemental or beast, and then tack on something that makes overloading good or makes it easier to do it. Maybe um, I really liked where they were going with Lava Shock. I just think they need to make better cards that do that.
Yeah, because the other one they tried was a 2 mana 3/2, but like it just needs more text on it. But it's challenging because I think when you put that text on the card, that's all the text that'll go in the card, just because that's how Hearthstone is. It's like you don't have these you don't have the compound, huge, massive walls of text that you have in Magic. They keep it pretty simple. So
Yeah.
it's if you put that on a minion, if you put that on a spell, the spell's effect has to be really simple. And if you put it on a minion, which is probably where it's best, then in order to pay you off, the minion's stats need to be good.
So this card is called Eternal Sentinel. Battle Cry. Unlock your overloaded mana crystals. So um, add to that and gain that much health.
Oh, that'd be
So
cool.
not on a 2 mana 3/2, maybe a 3 mana 3/4 or 3 mana 2/5. I don't know, but or a 2 mana 2/3. Battlecry, unlock your overloaded mana crystals, gain that much life.
Yeah, I think a 3 mana 3/4 would be fine.
Something like that, or unlock 2 of your overloaded mana crystals, and then it could be on a really well statted minion still, because it
Right.
wouldn't be like breakable, but it's recognizing the reality, which is usually you only have 1 or 2 mana crystals locked. And that's why
Yeah,
Lava Shock
definitely.
wasn't really that good, because it was dumbed down so much, because it could unlock potentially 18 crystals.
Right.
Certainly, you don't want to make it too easy for people to get 18 mana, but the reality is that really it was giving people 1 or 2 mana, and it was
Right.
weakened for that potentiality. Instead, they could have made it deal 3 damage on only unlock 2 crystals or something like that. I think that would have been a much better card.
Yeah, it's tough to make that card though in a world like where it's 2 mana for 3 damage. It's hard to that also unlocks your Overload. It's tough to make that card in a world where like Dark Bomb exists, but if they restricted it to just a minion, then that could be okay.
Yep, exactly. 2 mana, 3 damage to a minion, unlock 2 of your crystals, or you know, the way I would prefer to think about it is Lava Shock, and it does what it does, and it's good with things that overload way more of your crystals. But I think something that would help is if they also made at least one card, if not several, that are more impactful for their mana cost that recover only a couple crystals. And then
Yeah,
maybe
I mean,
maybe maybe it's a 2/3 that unlocks two crystals, and if you do unlock them, it gets +1/+1.
yeah, that could actually be really interesting. A card that, if it does unlock mana crystals, gets buffed. I think that'd be really cool because like then that's a way to make it statted aggressively, but also good. So I mean, you could have that be a 2 mana 2/2 that gets +1/+1 that unlocks your mana crystal gets +1/+1 if it unlocked
That
anything.
sounds spicy. I like that.
And yeah, so I mean, not +1/+1 for each unlocked, but
Yeah.
just +1/+1 if it unlocked any. Like there's that card's kind of decent at any point of the game, because the 3/3 is like an okay stat line, especially in a world where 1/3 taunts are just there's like 8 of them every game. Um, so I don't know. I mean, that's like an option, but I think there needs to be something. And I understand that that's a pretty tough design space to work in. Like
Hmm.
another possibility is to just sort of change up the overload cards that are in the classic set. I think that like the limitation of the classic set is that they kind of have to live with the mistakes that they made a long time ago.
Hmm.
That their first attempt at designing Hearthstone cards is like now just in every set, and they did a decent job. I mean, for their first attempt ever, like
Yeah, they really did.
I think they did a better job than like Wizards of the Coast.
Yeah, if you compare the
But
first set of Magic, good lord.
yeah, right, exactly. The healing salve or whatever is in the same cycle as Ancestral Recall.
That's why
But
that guy's got his hands on his head.
yeah, it's like, what are you thinking? I'm also thinking of Lightning Bolt and Giant Growth. Uh,
I like what you
but
mentioned before, though, about the minion that gets +1/+1 for each crystal it unlocked. That could be cool. That's what
if
friggin' Totem Cruncher should have been.
oh yeah, instead of destroying yeah, I hate Totem Cruncher. I like the art on it. That's the only thing I like about the card. Everything else about it I loathe.
I have a golden one.
Oh, that's. I bet the spikes look really cool. The spines.
They do, and there's like autumn leaves falling. It's
Oh,
it's
that's really
really
cool.
unfortunate that the art's so good because I should really disenchant it.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I mean, I think it's like a little bit harder to talk about. It's a little bit harder to design a card that gets like +1/+1 for each overloaded crystal it unlocks. It probably has to be a bit more aggressively costed.
Yeah, that
But
one
if it
could
just
be
gets
a
plus,
legendary even.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, that would be better than Marabi.
Would it though? Yeah, a lot of things would
Yeah,
be better.
it's just, but I mean, like that's sort of like exemplary. Marabi is exemplary of a lot of the problem with Shaman right now. It's that you have this big mechanic that's so central to the class and influences the class's play at pretty much every single stage of the game, and that's Overload. It's something that's dominated our discussion of the class, but the rest of the cards just have absolutely nothing to do with Overload. They're like a random smattering of Totem synergy, of Murloc synergy that's just basically unplayable, and like Elemental synergy. Elementals have just not ever really been a deck, and then like casting spell synergy. Like,
Yeah.
what the hell is going on here?
It just seems like they don't have the theme well ironed out, and they have a lot of partial themes, um, which could have maybe been good. Like that, you could argue that that's kind of what was going on with Token Shaman when that deck was working. Is like, well, Bloodlust and minions works. It doesn't matter if the minions have nothing to do with each other. Um, so that was sort of like if we just combine, the best cards from all these different themes, then they give us a bunch of minions and we can play Bloodlust and evolve. Um, but now that it's sort of lost its ability to generate those minions so easily, it doesn't have Maelstrom Portal and Jade Claws anymore. It
Mm.
can't even assemble the Bloodlust plan.
Yeah, and I mean, I do think Evolve was a really big deal in that deck.
Definitely, Unstable
Uh,
Evolution is not the same.
no, not even close. Yeah, so it just it lacks the sort of broken turn six play. Like two cards for a bunch of random 6 cost minions is
And
fair.
it's just so
Uh,
it's so dependent. Like not only is the overload stuff dependent and a needy thing, but then all this like icebreaker, destroy any frozen minion damage by this. Like, what is this?
yeah, it costs 3. Like, give me a break. Um, and I mean, like Stormforge Axe, that card has seen super duper fringe play, and it's just like it's with us forever. It's in the classic set. Um, or basic set or whatever. It's just like, ugh, yeah. This class needs a lot of help. It needs some cards that work with its classic set cards, because I think that the past couple of expansions have shown us that those cards don't stand well on their own. And if for those of you who've been playing for a while, you might remember a time before Tunnel Trog and Totem Golem, and Shaman also didn't see a lot of play then either.
Nope.
It was. I remember when mid-range Shaman was like the oppressive strategy. Well over a year at this point ago. I remember thinking when I learned about that deck, like, wow, I get to play Shaman now. This is a class I had just never played, and I never got to explore at all. I have no idea what they do. I'm going to play this Shaman deck because it's good. And I played it while it lasted, and it was awesome. And, it was oppressively so. And then there are good cards left, and it went back to being unplayable. And I think that really has to do with their base level mechanics. And I just, like, if anybody out there in Blizzard is listening, I'm sure you guys are already aware of the problems we're talking about. But, like, please, I think we as a community know that this is a really big issue, too. And we want to see this. We want to see these cards be good. We want to see this class be good. And like, there's just a way to do it, but it needs more than what you've given it. Something like a Lava Shock type effect that's always good in a perennial set would be awesome.
Yeah.
That might be asking too much.
And I mean, nobody asked for Murabi.
Yeah, nobody in
that.
the world. Like, this is so Cryostasis and Murabi were released in a world after discard effects existed. Like, to me, that is just it's so painful, because players don't like discarding their cards. I mean, like, Wizards of the Coast learned this when Madness was a mechanic back in, Odyssey Block? Like, that's forever ago. It's when we were children. And, like, they recognize, like, players don't like this Madness mechanic, and we brought it back, and they still didn't like discarding their cards. Like, even when, the second time around, it was still really good. And players don't like, screwing up things that they invested mana in. Like, look at the sacrifice effects in Warlock. Like, some of the only ones that have ever seen play are just, they're seeing play because they're combo pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Void Terror saw play when Nerubian Egg was around. Dark Pact seen play because Carnivorous Cube is around. Other than that, like the Ravenous Pterodax or whatever, that doesn't seem play. The Rush guy, he doesn't see play.
I know, that's sad. I didn't even open any to try my ridiculous Ancient Watcher deck.
That is quite silly.
I haven't gotten to do that. One of these days I'll open one, and we'll get to do that and use Countess Ashmore to conjure him up. It's gonna be a good time.
Yeah, that's a card that I'm surprised to not see, but I guess there just isn't really a mid-range deck right now that would use it.
Yeah, everything currently is either really going pretty hard, pretty fast, or is reaching infinity in the late game with some sort of cube nonsense. And then Shaman is just not doing anything. I think you summed it up really well when you said, like, they keep trying to add new themes every set to Shaman rather than developing what it already has. Like, and I think that is a big part of the problem. I would like to see more, things that relate to Overload, and Elementals have always kind of felt like they belong the most to Shaman. That's always been great, the Odd Murloc, the Totem stuff, but it's gotten out of hand with the freezing.
Yeah, I understand. They're faced with a really challenging problem, which is developing unique class identity for every class. And they also want the class identities to change with the expansions so that their game stays non-stale. Like, that is a really difficult problem, and I am not, even pretending that I could come close to solving that alone. I could at best come up with a bad idea.
Yeah.
But this is it's kind of like what Mark Rosewater said. Players are good at recognizing what's wrong, and they're bad at coming up with solutions. I'm recognizing what's wrong right now, or I feel like we are, talking about one thing that's wrong here, and it's tough to come up with a single solution. But I do think the part of the problem, or like one thing that is not a solution, is just giving it random synergies here and there, especially when none of them pay you off. Yeah,
like, I feel like if I'm complaining about all these freeze cards, then, Ben Brode knock on my door, like, well, Evan, what cards should we have put in? If we just put in a bunch of Tunnel Trogs and Totem Golems, you would have been complaining that it was boring. And so, like, you would have just, would have just been complaining about a different thing. The only reason you're complaining about this is because this is what happened. You would have been complaining no matter what. I don't know. I mean, when I look at a card like Avalanche, I'm not upset or disappointed. It's not a very good card, but it's cool, and
Yeah,
it's
sure.
icy, and it stops your opponent's minions. But then,
Yeah,
like, there's things like Murabi and Cryostasis, and I think that it would not have been difficult to have ice themed stuff that wasn't garbage. You
right.
know, like they did it with
Yeah,
Avalanche. Avalanche is right there. It's not amazing, but they didn't need to make things so clunky. It's such slow, clunky stuff in a set that's or in a class that's already got overload. You know,
yeah,
that's why things like Tunnel Trog and Totem Golem kind of make sense, and Lightning Bolt, these efficient spells, and these efficient minions, Flame Wreath Faceless, wind up being fair because of overload and like the clunkiness of the hero power, like, you know, Fire Blast, Mage's hero power. Like, if you want to win a Hearthstone game, if you keep doing one damage, you'll win. You know, and you can stop your opponent's minions from doing stuff. For, you know, recruiting a Silver Hand recruit, making a 1/1. Like, if you just keep doing that, you're going to overwhelm your opponent. But, like, getting an O2 that heals your minions, and then getting O2 taunt, like, that's really clunky, and it's random. The totem you get is random. So there's all this inherent sort of um, clunkiness and not non-linearity with Shaman that it doesn't also need only cards that are like that. It should be getting some percentage of cards that are like Totem Golem so that it can actually execute plans consistently in spite of things like Overload and its hero power. But instead, it got Avalanche and Cryostasis.
yeah. I understand what you're saying. I mean, the counterpoint to that is kind of, what Ben Brode said after he knocked on your door. By the way, he doesn't work for Blizzard anymore,
Oh wait, is that
which is
actually
really
is
something.
that official? I wasn't sure if he said he's leaving or that he left.
Yeah, so when he tweeted that, he said it was his last day.
Oh, okay. Well, he can still talk about Hearthstone.
Oh yeah, he
That's
can still
why
knock
he
on your
has
door.
time to come to my door and knock on it because he's not
Yeah,
working
so
for
actually
Blizzard.
that means he can definitely do it because like at some point like his NDA will be up, right? So he could definitely come and talk to you about it. But like anyway, yeah, I think you're right. But again, the counterpoint is that if those cards existed, like it would be really terrible if all of Shaman's class cards got ignored because those cards were good enough to carry with some neutral stuff. And
Well, that's
this is
yeah.
the this is the line that Blizzard is towing. And so, like, granted, I think that a playable class that is a little boring is probably maybe even better than just an unplayable class with a bunch of traps in it that just are cards that look like they're build arounds but don't pay you off.
Hmm.
Um, but it's a challenging line to toe between, you know, degenerate and playable and fun.
It is cute that they try to make freezing in Shaman a thing. I gotta at least give them props for trying.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I think that's cool, but like, well, it's kind of I kind of half finished my thought earlier. Like, the self-freeze players don't like to sort of lose what they already invested in, and self-freezing is that it just costs so much time,
Hmm.
and it takes such a long time to get the stats like out of cryostasis and actually make use of them unless you play them on a taunt. But it's not like Shaman's overloaded with insane taunt minions. It's not even like a taunt class, it has a bunch of kind of crazily statted taunt minions, but they're nowhere near as good as any of the other classes for which taunt is part of their identity, warrior and druid specifically. Um, so, this existed in a world where like players already complained of the discard mechanics. The hand buff mechanic wasn't working, so slow buffs to stats is just something that has had historical precedence for not being good enough. Um, it's just like it's shocking to me that they actually made these cards. Like,
Yeah.
ugh. I get that they were probably it makes sense to sort of print them because things are surprising. This is a game where people are wrong about evaluating cards, and that includes the design team, and that especially includes the players who've never played with the cards before. But so in a way, them taking risks and printing those sorts of effects makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah,
But
there's certainly logic to it, and like how good is it really going to be is going to entirely be up to us when it comes right down to it. So I can respect all of that. It just seems like the percentage of things that are like cryostasis has been too high lately. And
Yeah, for sure. I think that's the point.
part of Shaman's class identity is actually to have like a few broken cards, I guess. Because that ultimately is perfectly fair when your hero power doesn't even do anything half the time.
Yeah, it's also hilarious because one of the only gameplay related changes that has been announced in this expansion has been to a shaman card.
Wait,
So
oh
Shadow Walk.
yeah, what did they actually do with that?
They are making the animations play 2 times faster and capping it at 20 and effects per Shutter Walk.
Oh, I think it had been 30 before.
I see. Oh, I didn't know it had a cap. That's
I
interesting.
recently found out that Yogg is capped at 30.
Oh, cool.
And
That's
that's
cool.
why I just was assuming that they kept the same cap for Shudderwalk. Maybe it didn't have a cap before.
Yeah, I don't know. Either way, they're adding the 20 cap, and yeah, it's that's pretty funny to me that despite all of what we're saying, it is like the only class to actually receive a nerf.
Yeah, and
um,
there's the Hex nerf.
yeah, it's bizarre. I think that they know that they have a problem, and they were hoping that maybe between Ghostlight Angler and Zap and Burlock, maybe there would be some kind of deck, but like that goes right out the window in a world where Call to Arms exists.
Yeah, it can't if you're gonna play Murlocs, you definitely want to be playing Paladin.
Yeah,
Even though it lost file with an Inquisitor.
yeah. I think that's one of the most hilarious places where our predictions were incorrect. I think that we sort of had probably nailed it down in one of our earlier episodes that Murloc Paladin was dead, and just it's not actually. It's not at all. It's just one of the best decks
Yeah,
right
that's
now.
what I switched to after the season changed. I had been playing
Yeah, same
Control
actually.
Warlock, and then at the beginning of the season, I started playing. There's a Murloc list that has Vine Cleaver in it on Vicious Syndicate, and playing that exact 30.
Cool. Yeah, I swapped to a list yet. I haven't settled on my exact 30 yet, but I think I'm probably on a similar list. But I think there were two. One of them had a bunch of one-ups and one of them didn't, and I went with the one that did not.
Yeah, that's what I
But
started out with, and I tried it for a bit, and I was not enjoying it. It was not working out that well. I've
mm,
been liking the one with the one that Boar Control made. I started out with
right.
Phenoms, which is a lot more streamlined. Um, but this one has got one Blessing of Kings, one Fungal Mancer, one Vine Cleaver. Those have all been clutch.
Yeah, that's
And I have
interesting.
not missed Argent Squire.
Yeah, that's not too surprising. That card's like it without Rallying Blade. I think it lost a lot of its stake.
And a lot of it's hot dogs, too.
Yeah, definitely, and its burgers.
It's a burger
Um,
sandwich.
but yeah, I think we've ranted about Shaman enough. Do you think that's a decent place for us to wrap up?
Well, ultimately, yeah, and I did want to at least add that I am confident in them, and that
Oh,
I
same. Yeah.
do like even based on things like cryostasis, even if it was a flop, that means they're trying and they're not accepting a boring answer. So I really admire and appreciate that. And when they nerfed Hex, it got me really excited that this set was going to have a bunch of great Shaman cards, and they had to make sure that Shaman wasn't too good. Um, I'm hoping next set is like that.
Yeah,
But
I
I believe that they
I'm
nerfed Hex for a reason, that they really did think that through, and they really do plan on making more nice Shaman stuff that makes us understand more why Hex is 4 mana.
yeah, I'm with you too. I mean, I think at the end of the day, making this, we sort of alluded to this earlier. Making Hearthstone an interesting and functional game is really hard. And making any interesting and functional game, like especially a card game where the mechanics are changing constantly, like making any kind of game like that work is difficult. If you've ever spent any time playing a hero shooter or League of Legends or anything like that, you know that routine balance changes are really part of the experience. But I also am totally confident that these guys can figure it out eventually. It's just that it has some particular things right now that are wrong that I'm sure they're aware of, and there are some ways that they could fix it. And hopefully they're working on that. And I think that players would be a lot more satisfied, maybe, or I personally would be a lot more satisfied with a boring solution that makes the class good, playable, than another sort of stab at a random wacky effect. I think that that could, at worst, make the just keep everything the same or make the class even worse.
Yeah, because they can't like keep doing it. You know, it would have been maybe it wouldn't have been as big of a deal if we got the one set with cryostasis and then we went back to actually getting some playable stuff. But
Right.
when every set that comes out, other classes are getting Shadow Reaper Anduins and Psychic Screams and stuff like that, and Warpath, and these really powerful cards. And then every set that Shaman just gets wacky stuff, that set it's falling further behind. So it's sort of this is the first new set of this Year of the Raven. So I think that I think it'd be too early to say that Shaman isn't going to be a thing for the entire year. But it would be pretty bad for it if the next set also was more misses. This might be a good time to make the maybe more boring, more effective decision. Since
I
there
think
have
so
been
too.
so many
Yeah.
misses lately, get it back on its totem horse.
Yeah, and see that would give them an opportunity to see what it looks like when it works again.
And
Like in a sort of modern way.
was mid-range Shaman and stuff was definitely powerful and dominant, but there have been much worse examples of it. So I don't think they even need to worry about going back to something that was really bad. Like that's part of the game.
Yeah, also they could just slam the sort of lever on that and nerf a card. They've done that before, and I think players are okay with that.
That is always an available option. It's definitely really cool that they can do that instead of banning them, and I'm very happy with their nerfs. I don't think there's really ever been anyone that after I thought about it I still disagreed with it.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think I think they do a pretty good job.
Don't tell Fiery Warax I said that.
Yeah, I thought of that one too. That's why I hesitated a bit. I'm like, but I get it. I think 2 mana is too much, and there's not many places you can really change that card. And also, Pirate Warrior was just a problem.
There's no 2.5.
Yeah, there's no 2.5. Yeah, that's a tough one. We've talked about that one a bunch though. But yeah, what do you think about wrapping up there?
Let's wrap it up and wrap it out.
Can you wrap it out?
I can. Can you?
I don't really know how.
Have you tried?
Listen, so we're going to post a guide on how to wrap it out on lastturnhs.com. So along with that guide, you can find, the guide's never going to happen. You can find links to all of our stuff. You can also find us on twitter.com/lastturnhs or facebook.com/lastturnhs. We are also on SoundCloud at soundcloud.com/lastturn. And you can find us on iTunes or Google Play if you sort of like to listen to us on the go. I know that's how I like to listen to my podcast. But if you like to do it at your computer, or you have YouTube Red or something, or just normal YouTube, you can check us out on YouTube, our YouTube channel, which is Last Turn HS.
Yeah, and if you have any comments, questions, please let us know. It'd be pretty cool to get some questions on any of these things, Facebook, Twitter, and we can answer them in the podcast. If we ever,
yeah, definitely.
If people give us some nice, compelling Twitter questions, we can, pull them up and answer them on our next podcast. That'd be a pretty fun thing to do.
Yeah, we're always interested in sort of, knowing what you guys want to know, but also, we're always interested in topic ideas. So if you could do part of the work for us, that'd be pretty sweet.
Yeah, a topic idea, if there's something you would like to hear about, or if you have some thoughts about Shaman's current state and future state, we'd love to hear about that as well.
Yeah, hit us with that. I mean, we're always happy to take disagreements. That's something, I like it.
Ben Brood still hasn't showed up at my door, so I guess he doesn't have my address. That is one... No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, that's actually a bad thing. I wish he had my address. But anyway, we will catch you guys next turn.
Thanks for joining us, folks. See you next turn.